Will Nixon, Umari Hatcher, Justus-Ross Simmons, and Dan Villari. Which of those four players is most likely set to have a big year for Syracuse? Let's break it all down.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on this week's Poll Friday, I asked you all the question, which of these four Syracuse football veteran skill players is most likely going to have a huge year for the team? The choices: Will Nixon, a redshirt senior running back; Umari Hatcher, a redshirt senior wide receiver; Justus-Ross Simmons, a senior wide receiver; and Dan Villari, a redshirt senior tight end. So that's what we're going to discuss on this week's edition of Poll Friday. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Happy August, everyone. Believe it or not, Syracuse football plays a game, an actual game that will count, this month. That's right. We're just 29 days away from the start of the Syracuse football season, traveling down to Atlanta, Georgia to take on the Tennessee Volunteers. And to celebrate the first day of August and the fact that Syracuse football returns this month, we're making this week's Poll Friday a full podcast. So let's get right into it. What do Will Nixon, Umari Hatcher, Justus-Ross Simmons, and Dan Villari all have in common? Think about it for just a moment. There's a reason why I singled out those four players. For starters, they are all entering their final year of collegiate eligibility. What does that mean? It means this is it for them. This is their last chance to have a big role in college football, to play in college football, and to, maybe most importantly for them, to prove that they can play on Sundays. You know, just like the guy that played last night representing Syracuse football in Oronde Gadsden in the NFL Hall of Fame game. It's a big year for these four players: Will Nixon, Umari Hatcher, Justus-Ross Simmons, and Dan Villari. But another thing that these four players have in common, aside from the fact that this is their final year, is they're going to be much more relied upon this season for Syracuse than they were last season. How do I know this? I can't sit here and say that I'm Nostradamus. I can't necessarily predict the future. I can do my best. But if you try to forecast Syracuse football and their offense for this upcoming season, you can really go back to last year. Jackson Meeks, gone. Trevor Pena, gone. Oronde Gadsden, gone. LaQuint Allen, gone. Those were the four key skill players for Syracuse last year on offense. They are all gone. Now, the Orange, they do have guys that they hope can replace those players. Daryl Gill, for example. Last year, he was more of a depth player, but he really flashed in the playing time that he was given. We are all hoping that he could truly take that step and be a number one wide receiver for this team this upcoming season. I think he can. Many of you believe that as well. So he's there. He's back with Syracuse. They brought in Jonte Cook. Looks like they're going to use him in the slot a lot. He can also play on the outside. Electric talent. He's the Texas and Washington transfer, former 5-star recruit in 2023. We're all hoping that he can realize the potential that he does have. And hey, We're also hoping that sophomore running back Yassine Willis takes a big second-year step for Syracuse football. As a true freshman, he was able to get on the field, which is an accomplishment in and of itself, regardless of how he played. We're hoping that he takes that big sophomore jump for Syracuse. But I don't know if you feel this way, but I can tell you how I feel. You can never have enough weapons on offense. That's just a blank statement right there. You can never have enough weapons on offense. I have never heard a team say, we're good at wide receiver, we're good at running back, we're good at tight end, we don't want another good player. I've never heard anyone actually say that. Yeah, sure, you might have needs elsewhere that are bigger, more important, but you know what? You can never have enough weapons. And in order for Syracuse to truly have a successful offense, they are going to need more than just the three guys that I've already mentioned. Darryl Gill, Jonte Cook, Yassine Willis. They need more than that for this offense to even try to replicate what they did last year, which is already going to be very difficult, the number one passing offense in the country. So, let's get into the results. There were over 270 votes on this week's Poll Friday. Justus-Ross Simmons was the winner with about 58% of the vote, which means of you guys that voted, 58% of you believe that Justus-Ross Simmons is the most likely of the four veteran skill players on offense that can have a big year for the team. In second place, Dan Villari. In third place, Umari Hatcher. And in fourth place, you have running back Will Nixon. Now, I agree with you all, for the most part, that of those four players, Justus-Ross Simmons is the most likely player to have a big season. But hey, maybe you didn't get a chance to vote. That's okay. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. Which of those four players is most likely to have a big year for Syracuse in 2025 and emerge as another key contributor for this team this upcoming season? Again, Justus-Ross Simmons in first, Dan Villari in second, Umari Hatcher in third, and Will Nixon in fourth. Now, coming up, I'm going to tell you all why I believe Justus-Ross Simmons is most likely of those four to have a big season. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. When I'm on top of my hydration, I notice everything works better. My energy, my mood, my focus, even my skin. But getting enough fluids every day isn't always easy. That's why I've been loving Drip Drop. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Here's why Justus-Ross Simmons is the most likely of the 4 veteran skill players that we have discussed on this podcast to have a big season. And just to reiterate it one more time, the 4 choices on this week's Poll Friday were Justus-Ross Simmons, who came in first, Dan Villari, who came in second, Umari Hatcher in third, and Will Nixon in fourth. Now, we've discussed Justus-Ross Simmons a good bit on this podcast. He is actually, I think, in my opinion, one of the more interesting and intriguing players to talk about. And one of the more, I'm kind of excited to see what he's got for Syracuse in 2025. Comment in the comments section below. So many of you are probably aware already of Justus-Ross Simmons' story at Syracuse over the past year. But if you're not aware of it, that's okay. I'll give you the abridged version of it, just so that you can kind of understand Justus-Ross Simmons at Syracuse. Maybe you're a new listener here at Locked On Syracuse. Maybe you're just getting into Syracuse football. And to that I say, welcome. We're happy to have you here at Locked On Syracuse. So here's the abridged version for Justus-Ross Simmons. He was at Colorado State for a couple of years. He had a big season in 2023. He transferred to Syracuse in the spring of 2024, and he was projected to be one of Syracuse's top wide receivers heading into the 2024 season. But unfortunately for Justus-Ross Simmons, he dealt with a nagging hamstring injury in fall camp. It bled into the regular season. By the time he got healthy, it was already too late for him to carve out a role. Too many players on Syracuse's offense had emerged and just taken the role away from Justus-Ross Simmons. So he never really could get into rhythm for the Orange last year and live up to the expectations that we had for him. They had plenty of guys emerge. Trevor Pena broke out. Jackson Meeks seemingly came out of nowhere. Daryl Gill had a big sophomore jump. It was unfortunate for a guy like Justus-Ross Simmons, who myself and many of you believed was going to have a big year for Syracuse last year. Now, that's not to say that Justus-Ross Simmons didn't flash with Syracuse last year. In fact, he had a 2-touchdown game against Virginia Tech a year ago, and he was one of the big reasons why Syracuse came back from 18 points down in the third quarter against the Hokies to win that game. I thought that was a very important win for Syracuse football. So why Justus-Ross Simmons? Why do I think, and many of you think, he could have a big year in 2025? There are 3 reasons. Number one, it's health. Justus-Ross Simmons is healthy. It's kind of important to be healthy to have a big year, right? He just, last season, he could not get into rhythm. Dealt with a nagging hamstring injury in fall camp. Doesn't start the season on the team, or he's on the team technically, but he's injured. He's not on the field. He came back for a game. He missed a game, came back again for Syracuse. And like we just mentioned, it was too late for him to really carve out a role with the Orange last season. So now this year, instead of dealing with a nagging hamstring injury, he can just focus on becoming a better wide receiver today. Now, we hope that he doesn't get hurt, just like everyone on the team. We never wish injury upon anyone. So for right now, Justus-Ross Simmons is healthy, knock on wood, and perhaps he can have a big season for Syracuse like we thought he would last season. Number 2 is opportunity. He's got a lot of opportunity. We mentioned earlier all of the players that have left Syracuse football, the big 4 contributors on Syracuse's offense in 2024. They're all gone. What does that mean? Targets are available. Every team only gets a certain amount of plays, and every team only gets a certain amount of pass plays in a game. Well, you have all those players leaving, the Jackson Meekses, Trevor Pena, Rondé Gadsden, LaQuinn Allen caught a ton of passes out of the backfield. Those targets are available. Who are they going to go to? Sure, Daryl Gill's going to get some looks, obviously. Jonte Cook is going to get some looks. Who else is really going to get looks? Who else do you think is going to get a big opportunity? Ironically, one of those players is probably Umari Hatcher as well, who we're going to discuss more in depth in the third segment on today's show. Who's going to be the wide receiver 2? If Daryl Gill is your wide receiver 1 and Jonte Cook is your slot receiver, basically the direct replacement for a guy like Trevor Pena, second receiver is up for grabs. Maybe it could be a guy like Justus-Ross Simmons. And number 3, ability. Of all the players, Justus-Ross Simmons, or all the players that could be competing for Syracuse's wide receiver 2, Who do you think's got the best ability? Guy like Justus-Ross Simmons, Umari Hatcher, maybe the South Carolina transfer Tyshawn Russell, former four-star receiver Emmanuel Ross. I'm excited for all of those players. But Justus-Ross Simmons in 2023 played 12 games at Colorado State. He caught 45 passes for over 700 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he was an all-conference player just 2 years ago. When Justus-Ross Simmons was in the transfer portal, there was a lot of competition for him. Syracuse was fortunate to get him. And by fortunate, I mean there were a lot of big-time programs that were after him, and Syracuse won out in the portal. They beat out programs like the University of Florida, the University of Alabama, Penn State, Florida State, and plenty of other big-time programs in college football. Those big-time programs wanted Justus-Ross Simmons. Spoiler alert, those programs only want you if they think you can play. Not to say that Syracuse is taking players they don't think they can play. The point being is that those are big programs. If they say you can play, you can probably play. So Justus-Ross Simmons, why do I think he could have a pretty big season for Syracuse in 2025? I might be back on the Justus-Ross Simmons bandwagon here because I was certainly on it last year, thought he was going to have a big year. Number one, he's healthy. Number two, he's got the opportunity. And number three, I think he's got the ability as well. What are your thoughts? Do you agree with me that Justus-Ross Simmons is set to have a big year for Syracuse football? Or do you disagree with me? Jackson, you're dumb. You're stupid. You're not looking hard enough. I think it's going to be Will Nixon or Umari Hatcher or Dan Villari. Chime in. Comment in the comments section below. Which of those 4 key veteran skill players is most likely to have a big year for Syracuse football? Now coming up, we'll break down some of the other choices on this week's Poll Friday. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever to get concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and on this week's Poll Friday, we're breaking down which of these 4 veteran skill players for Syracuse is most likely to have a big year. Justus-Ross Simmons, who most of us believe is the most likely of these 4, followed by Dan Villari, Umari Hatcher, and Will Nixon. And we're about to discuss some of the other players that we have not yet mentioned too much here on today's show. But first, thank you all so much for actually making it to this point of the podcast. I hope that means you enjoy Locked On Syracuse. And if you haven't done so already, please feel free. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow to reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And of course, thank you and shout out to all of you who continue to like and subscribe to Locked On Syracuse each and every day. You all are truly the best. So, for the most part, we agree, of the people that voted, that Justus-Ross Simmons is the most likely of the 4 key veteran skill players for Syracuse to have a big year. And we discussed it in the second segment, some of the reasons why. But let's get to some of the other players, because I start to disagree with you. at this point. Will Nixon, in my opinion, is the second most likely of the four players to have a big year for Syracuse. Call me a Will Nixon truther because I liked Will Nixon last year. I thought he was an underrated pickup in the transfer portal for Syracuse. I thought he was going to take some snaps away from LaQuinn Allen, but in a positive way because I didn't want Syracuse to drive LaQuinn Allen into the ground. But unfortunately, after Will Nixon last year, he flashed for sure. But after just a few games, he missed the rest of the season with a broken foot. And it was unfortunate for him. He's a converted wide receiver. He started his career at Nebraska, actually. He transferred to Washington. He converted to a running back. He was a backup running back over on Washington. In fact, he was on that Washington team that made the national title game in 2023. So he's even got playoff experience that he can bring to Syracuse football. And when I look at Will Nixon, I do think there's opportunity for him in this backfield. I don't know if he's going to be designated as Syracuse's starting running back, but he's definitely going to get some looks. You got sophomore running back Yassine Willis, a bigger power back that I don't think anyone really wants to tackle. He's a big guy, and he's pretty fast too. But Will Nixon is a little bit shiftier. Probably better at catching passes out of the backfield. I think that tandem could be a really strong tandem for Syracuse football. So I think Will Nixon overall is a pretty underrated player. I don't think enough people are really talking about him and hit the impact that he can make for the Orange because, well, you just didn't see him a lot last year. He looked like he was playing well, and then he got hurt. It's unfortunate. Kind of similar to Justus-Ross Simmons in that regard. Got hurt. It happens. It's football. But for this year, there is no LaQuinn Allen who's going to take a bulk of the workload. Yeah, Yassine Willis, sure, he could take that big step. But I think Will Nixon is going to be right there with him as well. So he is second on my list of players that could have a big year that are veterans. Then you got Dan Villari. Fran Brown already named Dan Villari the starting tight end for Syracuse, replacing Oronde Gadsden, who again played last night in the NFL, right? Now, 2023, Dan Villari had a nice year for Syracuse, and it was out of necessity because Oronde Gadsden got hurt. Garrett Schrader got banged up. And when Garrett Schrader was banged up, Syracuse, quite frankly, they had nobody else who could really throw a football. In comes Dan Villari as basically the Wildcat quarterback for the team for the final third of the season. And he had some nice moments. Last year, I wouldn't necessarily call it a step back for him. It was more, they didn't really need him. They needed him to block, and that was about it. They had plenty of other pass catchers. They didn't need to use the Wildcat offense all that much last season. Now, I do think a guy like Dan Villari has a solid floor that he can bring to Syracuse football. I'm not sure he has the ceiling, especially of a guy like Justus-Ross Simmons, who has already been an all-conference player. I understand it was at Colorado State. That's not a power conference team. That's a group of 5 team. I get it. I just don't think he necessarily has that ceiling. He's going to get some opportunity for sure. I also wouldn't underestimate the impact that perhaps Jamie Tremble can make, 4-star tight end in 2024. Fran Brown has already said that we're going to like how they use Jamie Tremble as well. So we'll see. I think Dan Villari could be solid for Syracuse, but who's going to have a big year? I think it's more likely that it's one of Justus-Ross Simmons or Will Nixon before you get to Dan Villari. And that leads me to Umari Hatcher. I think they're very similar. Yeah, they play different positions, but in my opinion, they're veteran players that can provide a solid floor of production, who also had a better year in 2023 than they had in 2024. Umari Hatcher, I believe, almost had 500 yards in 2023. And then last year, Syracuse didn't need him to have nearly 500 yards because they had a lot of other guys. Now, look, I've been wrong before, and I will happily be wrong about Umari Hatcher. But for now, I think he is a depth wide receiver who can make big plays, but I don't see him having that huge year for the Orange like I could see with a guy like Justus-Ross Simmons or a guy like Will Nixon, perhaps. Could be wrong. I certainly didn't think that Jackson Meeks was going to have a big year. I didn't think that Trevor Pena was going to have a big year. So who knows? Maybe Umari Hatcher proves me wrong. I'll be happily wrong. If he breaks out, that's awesome for Syracuse football. One more time. Of these 4 veteran skill players, Justus-Ross Simmons, Umari Hatcher, Dan Villari, Will Nixon, who do you think is the most likely of those 4 to have a big year? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, as far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future, this weekend, we will have a full podcast. It's either going to be on Saturday or Sunday. I don't know exactly which day yet. Just depends on timing. But it's going to be about players who, in my opinion, are quote-unquote safe in their roles for this upcoming season. I know that head coach Fran Brown, he wants to install that culture of, hey, you got to earn it every single day. Completely understand it. I take him for his word on that. We're talking about players where if they handle their business in fall camp, keyword is if they handle their business in fall camp, we know what their role is going to be for 2025. We've already gone over some position battles. Now we're going to go over some positions that seem pretty set in stone for Syracuse in 2025. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. And thank you for making us your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Portal Show with football recruiting expert Brian Smith. He's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe and tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse. I will see you all again soon.